hope you had a chance to go to the bathroom, get some coffee, get a drink of water. We're going to start again. The last two talks in our plenary session are from Tony David and Dale Willman. Tony David's going to start off. He's a member of the St. Regis Mohawk tribe and has First Nation status in Canada. Beginning in March 2019, he became the director of the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe Environment Division, which includes diverse programs for water resources, air quality, solid waste management, land resources, and Superfund remediation, among others. Previously, he was the program manager for the Water Resources Program charged with protecting and enhancing wetlands, fisheries, and water quality in tribal waters. Under his tenure, the St. Regis Mohawk tribe became the first and only tribe in New York State to have federally enforceable water quality standards under the Clean Water Act. He grew the tribe's fisheries capabilities to conduct population survey and updated the tribe's fish advisories. He completed a 7-year project to decommission and remove the Hogansburg Dam, the first impassable fish barrier on the St. Regis River, and as a result, protected lands were returned to the tribe and exemplified the tribe's abilities as a sovereign to manage its own resources. So the ecological benefits include reconnecting 555 miles of river and stream habitat with the St. Lawrence, which is amazing. So the St. Regis Mohawk tribe is the only tribe in the U.S. to remove a licensed hydropower facility and the first to decommission and remove a dam in New York State. Today he's going to be talking to us about Indigenous place names and from the First Nations perspective, why it's so important to think about, from multiple perspectives, our concerns over ecological resources. Thank you.
Sego, Deganopolados, Tony David Yungets, Nano, Dahaladat, Yungets ne, Uwehoineha, Ahkwesáhsne, Teganagale, St. Regis Mohawk Tribe, Niwa Gyote, Environment Division, Nungwe. My name is Tony David. My Indian name, my Ungwahoi name is Dahaladat, which means he runs, or he's a runner. Traditionally, runners were the messengers, and we carried coded messages in strings of wampum, and it was said that the runners could run 70 miles in a day and carry messages to the neighboring villages. So in some way, I still consider myself a messenger. And thank you to Susan, our president, for the invitation to speak here today. This talk is kind of in two parts, right? And so this part is the fun part and the interesting part. The second part is sort of the bad news part, right? But we'll get to that, okay? First, let's just have some fun. So I know a lot of you driving around the state of New York, you see road signs with barely pronounceable names, and you say, that must have some sort of native language link, right? Well, chances are it does. And so hopefully after today's talk, you'll have a greater appreciation and interest in what some of these names are. But really, you know, it's about understanding our place in our context with our relationship with our natural resources. And so this is just an old-time map showing some of the territories of the Haudenosaunee, or the Six Nations, right? And you think about our expansive realm of influence. It goes beyond just the borders of what we now call New York State. It extends up into Canada, it extends down south, even into as far as the Carolinas. And our territories are, this is just an indication of what our territories were like. Well, we're on the subject of names. Of course, I said Haudenosaunee, or if you're Mohawk, Haudenosaunee. That's what we call ourselves, and it's the people of the Longhouse. The French and the Algonquin called us the Iroquois, right? And I guess the meaning of that in Algonquin language meant they eat snakes. You know, there's always a bit of a rivalry between different tribes and nations. We were jokesters then, and we're jokesters now. And actually, the name Mohawk also has its roots in Algonquin, meaning they eat flesh, which is kind of badass, actually. But our name for ourselves is Kentsi'kowáhne, the possessors of the flint. Right? And so these are just some of the examples. Now, apologies, this is from a Mohawk perspective, so to anyone in the audience who, where's Neil, my Tuscarora friend, Joanne, and Jordan, is Jordan around? Skana? So if I butchered your names, apologies in advance. But you know, these are how we view ourselves, and this is how we envision our connection to the land. So I just wanted to start off with that. Now, our history indeed is really a shared history, and this is a depiction of the Battle of Quebec, 1755, the death of General Montgomery, right? And so we see the continent, we see the American troops, we see other troops, but right dead center in the middle of this, you see a native dude standing defiantly with a tomahawk in the air. Well, this guy is actually a real person, and is my ancestor. And his name is Colonel Lewis Cook. And so it's kind of neat that in American history, like that's my ancestor, right? But you know, I put a little asterisk next to that because in genealogy circles, this is sort of like the gold ticket, right? Everybody wants to be related to Colonel Lewis Cook. Between him and the captive Tarbold brothers from Massachusetts, those are the ones that people always want to link back to. So I still need to verify that, but it's just really interesting that, you know, we've always been there. You know, our history is your history, and we've always worked together, even from the beginning. The Articles of Confederation, of course, were heavily influenced by the Haudenosaunee. And our trade routes, our connections, we've always been working together, sometimes working against each other. But you know, it's important just to recognize that this history is shared, and really it's reflected in the names. Now, I thought that I would just start off with the Adirondacks, right? Adirondacks refers to the porcupine, of course, which likes to eat bark. But you remember what I mentioned earlier about the Algonquins? Well, allegedly, this was the word for the Algonquins that we call the Algonquins. And allegedly, it was because perhaps they weren't very good hunters. And allegedly, they were so poor, in fact, that all they had to eat was the bark from trees, allegedly. So, snake eaters, flesh eaters, bark, right? Pretty good one. But I just wanted to share that a little bit at the back, where that word actually comes from. It's so close to the actual Mohawk spelling. Canada, Gananda, village or settlement. It's amazing, right? The name for a country is a Mohawk word. It originally was about a settlement near Quebec City, right? But it officially became the name of the Dominion of Canada in 1791. Niagara Falls, Ohnia, and refers to the nape of the neck, but what we're really talking about is the back of the collar, the inside of the collar, right? And so if you look at Horseshoe Falls, from the language perspective, they're talking about the inside of the collar, so it's kind of interesting. Schenectady, Skanéhtati, beyond the pines, and I try to break down some of the words just so you can see where the Mohawk language is polymorphistic. So it's like mini sentences in one word. It's very descriptive. So yes, referring to one, like anska, ga meaning it, pine, and di, Skanéhtati. So beyond the pine. So where our homelands in the Mohawk River Valley, central New York, Skanéhtati was beyond the Adirondacks, just beyond the pines. In trying to find a picture of Schenectady, I came across this Lawrence the Mohawk statue. I've never been there, but interesting. Turns out it's actually a mail order statue. There's several of them across the country. Lawrence the Mohawk. Sometimes those names are derived from conflict. Okay? Utica was a North African Roman city. Okay, but lotékha literally is just from the Mohawk language means it's on fire. Okay, so after the American Revolution, then President George Washington ordered Sullivan and Clinton to began a scorched earth campaign against the Haudenosaunee. And it was kill all, burn the villages, slash the crops, push them out, and starve them out. And this was, this was really the beginning of the end of the Mohawks living in the Mohawk River Valley. But also, that name, speaks volumes about what happened in that time, and it's important to acknowledge that history. So, I think if you were to if you wanted to meet with a tribal government, or tribal nation, maybe Utica is not the place to host a meeting, but it's just it's important to acknowledge that. Kaniatari, Kaniatari Creek, literally means the pot that washed itself, the washed pot. So this is a little swimming hole in Kaniatari Creek, which is fascinating that something that seemed like so hard to pronounce, and so that word is lasting. Oswego, just meaning the mouth of the river. And there's several places that are called Oswego, not just here, but also near the Six Nations Reserve in Brantford, Grand River territory, also called Oswego. Same thing. Skanéhtati, S meaning one, Ga meaning it, Nyada meaning water body, and S meaning long. So literally just saying long lake, right? Long water body. So there's one I neglected. There was one sign for Toronto. Delundo means just timber on the water, right? Sorry, I just realized that was excluded. But I wanted to turn and transition back to the St. Lawrence River. That's particularly important to us. But if a lot of these names are names of war heroes. Some of them are land speculators. Sometimes they're the immediate family of war heroes or speculators. And so Ogdensburg is named after Samuel Ogden, but the word Zewagaji is not actually a Mohawk word. There used to be an Onondaga settlement there that they were displaced. Now the Mohawks have 3 family clans: bear, turtle, and wolf. Right? But tribal members in Ahkwesáhsne, we also have snipe clan. We also have deer and hawk. Right? Those are Onondaga clans. So we say that we think that we assumed a lot of those people from Zewagaji. Of course, the river that runs through Ogdensburg is Oswegatchie, right? So that's where that name came from. Just upstream from Ahkwesáhsne on the St. Regis River is this town called Helena, land speculator's daughter. Right? Now, to us, the name Helena, it was not Helena, it was Ohnia, which means from the root of the word for salmon, Gala, Lutne meaning the place of the salmon. If you go to Helena now, it looks nothing like you would expect a salmon fisher, right? I mean, the unfortunate reality is that the water quality and the watershed has changed so drastically. Now it's a Class C water body. So, but for us it was a bit of an awakening, because we thought that using native language and using our traditional ecological knowledge could get us to challenge the status quo and think about what the restoration potential is beyond what we see right now, but think about what could be. And this was one of the many reasons why we pursued the decommission and removal of the Hogansburg Dam. I always find a way to work this talk into this slide every time. But as Susan described in 2016, this dam was built on our land, and we always wanted to take it back. We've been trying for generations. We never would have dreamed that we would have taken it back to remove it, but nonetheless, 2016 we took it out, and this was the first impassable barrier to fish. And so we've been working with GS and Tunison to stock Atlantics in this river to try and return this, mixed results. But I think it's an ongoing process. But this is an example of this knowledge helping us to inform environmental goals. but also it's analogous to the strength of our partnerships, right? Because this was accomplished because of the support from many people who are in this room right now. And I'm looking at Fish and Wildlife Service, I'm looking at GS, I'm looking at DEC's Regions 5 and 6. You know, I'm looking at, you know, all my friends here in this room who we leaned on you guys to bring this project. So this is our mutual success, not just the tribes. Moving west of Ahkwesáhsne, so Messina, Napoleonic General André Messina. Nigonjage. It refers to a fish, but for my language experts, it's not just the place of the fish, but it's just a place of huge significance and abundance. And to think about like our expansive territory, the Mohawks, right? But this place was the spot for fishing, right? Fast forward to today. Unfortunately, it's basically a canal. Right? It was dredged completely. It's a Superfund hazardous waste site. You know, the word for the Grass River, it talks about, you know, where we went to pick the grasses. I mean, this was an important resource. So it's still an important resource to us to this day, and we don't give up on that. And you know, we will continue to try and restore the Grass River as best we can. And another example of how this informs our what we do in tribal government, but also the strength of our partnerships. And just recently we announced the tribe, the St. Regis Mohawk tribe in the state of New York are joint partners on coordinating this area of concern, looking at evaluating impairments and scoping future restoration goals. So this is another great example of how we can work together with tribes and First Nations to achieve mutual goals. So there's a lot of really good success stories. Moving east to Fort Covington, Kentsi'kowáhne, big fish, place of the big fish. Now, we don't know which big fish, but the salmon river does flow through Fort Covington, so it was probably a reference to a salmon, but you know, that type of detail is lost, but still, you know, here's a picture of the former dam in Fort Covington that was removed back in 2009. In English, it's Kentsi'kowáhne, but in Mohawk, it's Skanéhtati. Ah, sounds so much better. Kentsi'kowáhne. I mean, it just means at the rapids. So this is near Montreal, the Mohawk territory at Kentsi'kowáhne. And of course, Ahkwesáhsne. This is where I'm from, Ahkwesáhsne. So there was this guy, St. Francis, St. Regis, Jean-Francois Regis, right? They named us after him for some reason. But we prefer to call ourselves Ahkwesáhsne. And actually, there's a discussion right now. Should we change the name of the St. Regis Mohawk tribe to be more inclusive and representative of who we are? That may happen. But the word guisant, referring to ruffed grouse, ne, the place of, but it's metaphorical. If you think about the drumming sound that the ruffed grouse makes, and of course anyone who hunts knows that you're walking through the woods, you keep your finger off the trigger in case you jump one of these birds. Right? But it was supposed to refer to the sound of the bass of the thumping of water cascading over rapids. So there's a picture of Longhouse rapids, right? These rapids have since been silenced, right? But you know, that was what that name meant to us. And while I'm on the subject of silencing the rapids, we're beginning to transition into the bad news part of the topic. So, like, you know, it only stands to reason that the one thing that the next best thing to do after removing a dam is to become nominated by the International Joint Commission to be on the board of an even bigger dam. And like Hogansburg, this dam is also on our land, right? And my reasoning for becoming a part of that group is just one. I wanted direct access to information. Because if we, my community, if we are ignorant, then we are at the mercy of others. Right? And so I think that's something that we all can appreciate, and that's the tenor of how I present when I interact with communities around the basin. Is look, we all want to understand what's going on. And so that's what I try to do. And this dam on the St. Lawrence River near Messina and Cornwall regulates the outflows from Lake Ontario. So Lake Ontario, Kaniatari, literally just means nice lake. Anytime you see that "io" on the end of the word, it means nice. So, Gaio, great law. Geneseo, that probably has a good meaning in Seneca. It's common. A lot of people's names have that "io" at the end, just meaning good. So, yeah. So the Great Lakes, they're kind of pissed right now. Every one of them is at or near record high, and it's on an uptrend, and there's no signs of letting up, right? And you know, we tend to think of these water bodies and shorelines with a sense of complacency and permanence, but they are constantly changing and constantly shifting. And I've personally seen and heard a lot of really smart people come up with not so smart reasons on why they don't need to adapt to the environment. And I think that those assumptions are being challenged right now. And Lake Ontario is no different. But the one thing that the Moses Saunders Dam has is that it does have influence in reducing high water events and speeding up the recovery. And so the bad news is, today where we are right now, we have a greater than 50% chance of having another high water event on Lake Ontario. And you know, I think we've been holding on to this forecast and announcing that broadly to the public because we want to be sure. But now that we're at beyond the 50% threshold, I think it's time to start procuring resources and preparing. So I've asked the communications community to put out a media release next week, and so we're working on that at the moment. But that's, you know, it's what it would take to prevent another flood event right now would be a drought. Okay? And there's no sign of a drought happening. So. High water events defined by 75.5 meters above sea level, so roughly 247.7 feet. And the history of operations is dotted with high water events, even post-construction. So 73, 74, 76, 93, 98, 87 even was in there. And of course, 2017, 2019. Now what the project can do, now you see the difference between the orange and the blue, is the pre-project levels versus post-project. So it does reduce the intensity of these high water events. It just can't prevent them. And it certainly does speed the recovery. Now, you know, sometimes when I go into communities and I talk with folks, I ask them, you know, how did you fare during the flood of 2018? And of course, there was no flood in 2018 because conditions improved. The influence of the system was able to get that water off the lake and keep it off, right? However, in 2019, conditions changed. We weren't in a dry weather pattern, and so the water came right back up. There's really nothing that water regulation